Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MBS News presidential debate for the United Cities election for October 2017. I'm Kitty Cat 11231, and we're here at the MBS Broadcasting House with presidential candidates JPH Golf 4321 and _ Castle, both independents. Sesh Penguin could not make it here today, but this debate is going to be between JP and Castle. So before we begin, I would just like to go over the debate format. So we are going to first have 2 minutes for each candidate to give an opening statement. Then we have a series of questions which we are going to ask each of the candidates. Then there is going to be a section for members of the public to ask questions to the candidates. And then after that, we are going to go to a 2-minute closing statement. Oh, and each question, each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. So let's go straight into the debate with the opening statements. We're going to start with you, JPH Golf 4321, independent candidate for president. You may begin your opening statement. You have 2 minutes to make your opening statement, starting now.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank all of you. Thank you at MBS for inviting me to this debate, and to thank my supporters who have helped me to get this far to begin with. And I think, and I'd like to thank Castle as well for being here and putting this debate on. I hope we can take this opportunity to really inform the public about what they'll get depending on who they vote for. Well, from me, I think in case I don't cover it all here, I'd refer you to my interview with a Build pilot. But what I want to do is I want to emphasize the united part of the United Cities. I want to make sure that there's some dialogue going on between people who have different ideas, that compromise reemerges, that we can have some hard deadlines, that we can create some new committees, get stuff done, and keep this organization alive the way that it should be. Thank you.
All right, thank you, JP. Another thing I forgot to mention in the debate format, another thing after, of course, all of the candidates have answered their questions, there will be a rebuttal section, and there will be another rebuttal section after the public questions. But anyway, to continue with the opening statements, we now go to presidential candidate _ Castle, who is also an independent. Castle, you have 2 minutes to make your opening statement, starting now.
Okay, well, I would agree with what most of JPH said in his opening statement. One of the things, however, that I do want to emphasize is I feel like right now the United Cities isn't being very effective. Committees aren't getting the things done that they should, or at least the 3 committees right now. It doesn't seem like there's much activity going on there, so one of my first actions would be to really look into reforming what's going on with the roads, transit, and history committees. I've also said that there's a few other policies that I'd like to implement. I would like to look into using the UC to sort of pick up the slack on, I guess, what you could call Yoshi games, because alright, since Yoshi's gone off to college, it seems like there's a lot of games don't happen, and so I feel like, right, since we have this platform where we have all of these members from the MRT together in one place, I think that we might be able to use that to our advantage and maybe make up some sort of like a games committee to get something like that off the ground. But just overall, I think there needs to be a reform of how committees in general operate. I mean, not necessarily a legal reform, but reforms in terms of, the officers need to make sure that they're holding the committees accountable and make sure that when committees set deadlines, those deadlines actually are reached.
All right, thank you, Castle and JP, for your opening statements. Next, we are going to go to the debate questions. These questions were created by MBS News. After that, we are going to have a rebuttal section. Then there are going to be audience questions. Since we started with JP for the opening statement, we are going to start with Castle for the first question. So the first question is pretty straightforward, and we are going to begin with you, Castle. Why should people vote for you over your opponent? You have 1 minute to answer this question, starting now.
Well, this is probably about the third time that I've answered this question, and I'll answer it in basically the same way. I think that when JPH and I were presidents, it happened at very different times. JP was mostly during his term responsible for getting the UC up and running, and I essentially, right, during my terms was more responsible for dealing with, sort of, I guess, after the initial excitement from, we have a UC now, kind of wore off. And I feel like in my term, I really had to find a way to keep people excited. And I think that's not necessarily something that JPH had to deal with because, he was sort of riding the wave of initial excitement. And not to say that that makes him a bad president. I just think that that's where his experience is. His experience was in getting the UC started up, but I feel like right now we need someone who can not necessarily get the UC started up, but sort of revitalize that excitement.
Thank you, Castle. Now we're going to ask the same question to you, JP. Why should people vote for you over your opponent? You're going to have 1 minute to answer this question, starting now.
Well, like Castle said, I think this is probably like the third time I've had to answer this, but may as well do it again. I think that Castle is right. That my experience with the UC was more with riding the initial wave of excitement from creating it, and then not having to deal with keeping people into it like he has. But I feel like the experience of starting it up and getting people excited to begin with, to ride a huge wave of excitement and stuff like that. I feel like if I can do that again, and I feel like I have the ability to do so, then I think that would be a better. That would make me a better choice for president. But I think obviously both of us up here are qualified. Okay, I'm being told to finish my sentence. So, I think that's why it would be a better choice.
Okay, thank you, JP. The next question I'm going to ask is sort of a similar question. What makes you the most qualified candidate in the race for president? Since we started with Castle last time, we are going to start now with JP. JP, you have 1 minute. You have 1 minute to answer that question, starting now.
Well, I think I'd like to think I'm more qualified. We're both qualified, let's be honest. But I'd like to think I'm more qualified because I started this. This was mostly my idea to begin with. This was this thing is, I don't know how to say it anything better than my baby, and I don't want my baby to die. So I think that from my experience starting it up and coming up with those ideas that got people interested to begin with, if I can repeat that process somehow, like reboot the UC, something like that, then and I think I can do that, then that will be a better UC for all of us.
Thank you, JP. Now, Castle, we're going to ask you the same question. What makes you the most qualified candidate in the race for president? You have 1 minute to answer this question, starting now.
Well, obviously, both of us up there have had a lot of experience. JP founded the UC and was president for a term, and I was, also a 2-term president. But again, it's not necessarily that you have experience. Experience helps, but it's also what you do with your time while you're in office. So I know that, well, during when I was in office, I did push through a lot of legislation, not the committee system in general, but essentially the committee system as we know it today, with what executive committees can do and what legislative, that sort of distinction. That framework was mostly created by me in terms of, oh, well, executive committees can undertake projects and stuff like that because, right, before essentially executive committees had to vote on every project they undertook, and that was, ridiculous. So I think that I have a reputation of sort of, getting rid of red tape, if you will. And so I think that's what makes me the most qualified. I know how to, essentially, I would say manipulate the system in a way that helps me get things done that can benefit all members of the UC.
Thank you, Castle. We're going to go now to the next question. We're going to start with you again, Castle. Now, both of you, JP and Castle, are past presidents who are seeking to return to office. Now, there is a certain segment of members in the United Cities who have expressed concern over electing the same officers over and over again. Why shouldn't people vote for a new candidate and instead vote for you to become president? We're going to start with you, Castle. You have 1 minute to answer this question, starting now.
Well, I mean, I think that people should vote for me for a lot of the reasons that I've already outlined. And I just want to say, it's almost like there's this idea that we have a problem with newer members. And I mean, we really don't, right? Because that would be kind of stupid. If we didn't want newer members to join the UC, then, the UC would essentially stagnate. So that's not something we want. I think that you should vote for us because we're qualified candidates. Now, if you feel as a voter that those newer members are more qualified than we are, and if they can properly articulate those reasons that they're more qualified, then by all means, if that's what you feel when you're, ultimately making your decision to vote, then vote for them. But judge us based on our qualifications, not whether or not we were, president or whatever office before.
Thank you, Castle. Now we're going to ask you the same question, JP. You are a past president, and some members have expressed concern over electing the same officers over and over again. Why should members vote for you instead of voting for a newer candidate? You have a minute to answer this question, starting now.
Well, I'm basically going to reiterate literally everything Castle just said, because I agree with basically everything he said. And I'd like to add to that if you want newer members to be in power and have officer roles in the UC, then you should encourage more of them to run, because we haven't really had in this election. I can't really think of very many newer members or new faces that are actually running. Like we've got we've got a bunch of people who've been candidates for a bunch of elections before. We've got people who've been members for years. I can think of maybe only a couple of people who have either never run before or have joined joined the server for the first time within the past 2 years. So I think you should, if you want new blood, then encourage the new blood to run, because the new blood hasn't been running.
Okay, thank you, JP. We're going to move on now to the next question. And we're going to start with you, JP. If elected, what would you change about how the United Cities currently operates? You have a minute to answer this question, starting now.
Well, obviously, deadlines would be important. I would need to enforce deadlines on the committees that I have executive power over, and then try and persuade the legislative committees to do something for themselves to enforce deadlines. And in addition to that, I'd want to create a new committee that takes on just general large projects. So something I've come up with like 5 different names for it, but right now I'll call it the contracting committee. Like, so basically how that would work is members would fill out something on a form, or just come up to a member of the committee and say, hey, I'm building this really huge stadium for my town and I want some help with it, or I've got this really big skyscraper that I need some ideas for how to furnish. I want some help furnishing it, that sort of thing.
Thank you, JP. Next, we're going to go back to Castle. Castle, same question to you. If elected, what would you change about how the United Cities currently operates? You have a minute to answer, starting now.
Well, I'd first like to say that what JPH just said seems like a pretty good idea, and I hope that gets implemented regardless of, who becomes the president. Now, as far as what I'd like to change, I sort of alluded to this in my opening speech, but I would like to make a games committee, because I really think that, in Yoshi's, not absence necessarily, but again, he can't be on as much. I feel like that's something that, games have really, defined the MRT, at least for me. There's virtually, no other server that hosts, an amazing race or all these elaborate things like that. So I would like to put the manpower of the UC behind doing something like that, because it's really a good, just thing, healthy competition like that. I really think builds the community. And also, I've sort of want to not make a Parks and Rec committee, but more of a landscaping-ish committee. So not necessarily parks, because as we found out, that didn't go very well. But obviously, whatever happens, we need to make sure that current committees and any new committees are meeting their deadlines and being held accountable.
All right, thank you, Castle. And we're going to move on again to the next question. We're going to start with you, Castle. What is your opinion on the current functioning of committees, and how would you change it if you would seek to change it? You've kind of sort of answered this question, but I'm going to give you 1 minute to answer, starting now.
Okay, well, as I've said before, I believe that currently the main issue with committees is that they're not being held accountable. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with the legal framework. It's more, whether or not the current officers are making sure that committees are held accountable. So, I mean, if I'm elected, I'm going to make sure that that we need to set reasonable deadlines and reasonable goals, and we need to make sure those goals are met. And if those goals are not met, we need to either reassess whether or not those are attainable goals, or put people in power who can meet those goals. Now, obviously, this is true for, anything like the Transit Committee or the Roads Committee. If projects aren't getting done, then we need to look at why they're not getting done and identify how we're going to make sure that those projects get done.
All right, thank you. Same question to you, JP. What is your opinion on the current functioning of the committees, and if so, if you would, how would you change it? You have a minute to answer, starting now.
Well, obviously, the 3 real committees that we currently have haven't really been doing much. I know that the A8 and the Roads Committee is slowly but surely creeping northward, and the what was it? And I think the Transit Committee just had a meeting today, and we gave Fred a line to do. But I think and History Committee hasn't really done anything yet. But we need to obviously poke those committees hard to get them to do stuff on time, to make things happen the way they're supposed to. And if there is a lot of inactivity in the committee, then maybe we need to rethink just who is in that committee and who should be in that committee, and probe the people who aren't in the committee. What do you think? Hey, what do you think of this committee? What do you think we could do better? That sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. Now the next question is sort of related to this. We're going to start with you again, JP. Would you change the current appointments of the members on the committees? And if so, how would you change it? You have a minute to answer, starting now.
Well, I'm honestly not 100% sure if I would change what I would change when it comes to membership of the committees, if I would want to. I think I'd have to. I'm not going to outright say, okay, if I get elected, these 5 people are off these committees, because I feel like that would kind of alienate votes. I would want to just observe all of them once I'm elected, and take a look and see, okay, here's who's performing well, here's who's not pulling their weight, here's someone who hasn't even talked in the committee channel in X amount of days, weeks, months, that sort of thing. So I think I'm going to take more of we'll just look and wait and see how things are going. So I would say this: take any and all committees, take this into account right here and right now. If I get elected, I'm going to be watching you, so you'd better be sure to get stuff done.
Thank you, JP. Same question to you, Castle. Would you change the current appointments to the committees? And if so, how would you change them? You have a minute to answer, starting now.
Well, I mean, I don't think it would be fair to not give them a chance, so what I would do is, if I got into office, I would basically say, okay, what are the projects you're working on right now? And then based on the project, I'd say, okay, you have this much amount of time to get things done, and if you don't, then we're probably going to shake up either the leadership or the members of this committee, based on whether or not that goal is achieved and who works towards achieving that goal. Also, for the roads committee, I would probably at least consider finally appointing a chair to that committee, and I can't necessarily say who that is at the moment, because that would likely depend on the results of the election, but it would probably be someone from the committee who's, had experience with that for a long time. As far as the history committee, I'm really not sure what their goals are yet necessarily. So I can't really speak to that, but just overall, I'm gonna say, like JP, it really does depend on who I see working and who's not working.
All right, thank you, Castle. And now the final question for this section of the debate. We're going to start with you, Castle. What is your opinion of the current president, and how would you either continue or alter his path of leadership? You have a minute to answer this question, starting now.
I don't think the current administration has done enough to make sure that committees get things done, and I don't think that the current administration has done enough to keep people excited about the UC. So, that part of that is just always, introducing new ideas. Like, I think both me and JP have, said, new things that we'd like to implement, and also, again, being open to suggestions from members. And I haven't really seen any of that happening. I can't say I've seen the president, taking a very active role and, making sure that committees get stuff that they say that they'll do done. And so that's something that I think that whoever gets elected really needs to look into start doing.
Okay, thank you, Castle. And finally, JP, same question to you. What is your opinion of the current president, and how would you either continue or alter his path of leadership as president? You have a minute to answer this question, starting now.
I'm basically going to reiterate what Castle just said, that I think they have done the current administration has done not nearly enough to keep people interested in the UC, keep the committees working, and just do stuff in general. So, in other words, no, I would definitely not continue their current path of leadership. And in fact, that's part of the reason why I decided to throw my hat in the ring in the first place, because I want to minimize the chances of another administration like that one coming into power. And I'm all but certain that if Castle were to be elected, that wouldn't happen. But I think that the UC, going into the future, needs to have a president and officers in general who are more willing to get involved, go around, check up on projects, and just make sure everything works the way it should be.
Okay, thank you, JP. And that is it with our general questions section of the debate. Now, next we're going to go to the rebuttal section. Now, each candidate is going to be given a chance to rebut the points that their opponent made during the previous questions section. We're going to start with JP since he was the last person to speak, and we're just kind of alternating. And then we're going to go to Castle, and it's basically just going to be a back and forth there. For each, you're going to have 90 seconds to make a statement, JP, and then after that, Castle will have 90 seconds to make his statement in response. And if you would elect to do so, you can continue to do that. And we will do that until you have no more points to rebut each other on. So we're going to start with you, JP, to rebut points Castle has made during this debate. You have 90 seconds starting now.
Well, the only big rebuttal I really have at the moment is, what are you going to do to try and keep people from leaving the UC once you're elected? Because from what I've seen from the members, and especially some who want to vote for me, they seem a little bit afraid of what might happen if you were to take the presidency. So what I would want to hear is, how are you going to keep this thing together if you're elected? How are you going to try and prevent a mass exodus? I mean, I know you personally. I know you would do a good job, but I know that there are also a lot of people in the UC who don't have that faith in you.
Okay, well, sorry.
Castle, you have 90 seconds to make your statement, starting now.
Okay, well, thank you for bringing up that and giving me a chance to respond to those concerns. I think a lot of it goes back to what I've said throughout this debate and throughout every interview that I've basically given almost, and that's that, I really think that it's important that officers and the president show, part of keeping people interested is that the officers and the president have to be interested, and they have to not only be interested, but show that they're interested, right? And part of that is, let's say that the roads committee has a road that they say that they need to get done, and it's not getting done. Maybe you take a night and you say, okay, people who are on the roads committee, come with me. We're going to get this done tonight. And you essentially do whatever it is that you need to do to get that thing done. Let the task be the boss. And, obviously one thing like that isn't going to change anything. But if you keep doing stuff like that and you make it clear to different members of the UC that you care about the things that they have to contribute to the organization, and you help them make those contributions, I think that's how you keep people interested in the UC.
Okay, thank you, Castle, for responding to JP's point. I'm going to give you 90 seconds, Castle, now, if you would like to make any rebuttals against points JP has made during the questions section. And then after that, JP will have 90 seconds to respond to that. So, Castle, you have 90 seconds starting now.
Okay, I mean, there hasn't really been anything that JPH said where I thought, yeah, I disagree with that, wholeheartedly. I think it's more, you just essentially have a choice between two different styles of management. So I'm not really going to make any rebuttals because, there hasn't been anything that JPH said where I just think, wow, that's egregious. That cannot happen. So I'm really not scared for the future of the UC if either of us gets elected. I just think you have a choice between two different styles of management, and that's a choice that the voters need to make.
All right. And JP, would you like to issue a response?
Well, other than that's basically exactly what I would have said, then no.
All right. In that case, that is the review of the MBS News presidential debate for the United Cities election. We're going to go to questions next from members of the public. But first, here are some commercial messages. We'll be right back.
Every time you call on me, I drop what I do. You are my best friend, and we've got some things to do.
Can I have a fresh donut, please?
What's a donut? We only serve muffins.
Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me. I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed. She was looking kind of dumb with her finger and her thumb in the shape of an...
And welcome back to the MBS News presidential debate. I'm Kitty Cat 1231 once again with Castle and JP. We just went through some questions and gave each candidate time to review each other's responses. Now we have some questions from members of the public. The first question we're going to ask is for both of you. And I believe JP was the last person to speak, so JP is going to be the first person to answer the question. Now, JP, this is a question from a member of the public. During both of your terms as president, the UC almost shut down. This is actually a question to both of you, so I'm just going to read it now. But during both of your terms as president, the UC almost shut down. With JP, you tried to shut it down yourself, and under you, Castle, it almost got shut down by the server staff. What actions would you take to ensure there isn't a repeat of this? JP, you have 1 minute to answer, starting now.
Well, obviously, since then I've learned that that there is some things that are more important than others, and that I need to be sure not to overly stress myself out about this, because in the end, this is just a game. So for my situation, I was just getting frustrated with all of the stuff that was going on. Honestly, it was getting too active at that point. So what I would do is basically just be sure to take a step back, take a deep breath every now and then, and keep myself calm, cool, and collected throughout the whole term.
All right, thank you. Castle, we're going to ask the same question to you. During both of your terms as president, the UC almost shut down. With JP, he tried to shut it down himself, and with you, it almost got shut down by the server staff. What actions would you take to ensure there isn't a repeat? You have a minute to answer this question starting now.
Well, I would just like to say that the assertion that the UC was almost shut down by the staff under my term is kind of an exaggeration, in that because I was actually at the GSM where we were discussing the UC, right? And essentially all that was said was, it's okay for now. Some things got a tad out of hand, and we're just going to issue a public statement basically saying, don't go too crazy. And actually, I can read you the part of the statement, at least right now. It has come to the staff's attention that recently there has been several incidents of disrespect and needless drama within the game. Political organization known as the United Cities. Up to this point, staff has taken a largely hands-off approach. And then it basically goes on to say, remember rule number 4, this is just a game, chill out and have fun. So, I mean, it really did not get to the point where, yes, we are definitely going to shut this down. So I don't really think that that's an issue, but again, I would point to the same thing the statement pointed to. Rule number 4, don't take things out of proportion.
Okay, the next question is just for JP. This is another audience member question. So JP, you are currently proposing a committee for people to assist others in building and other tasks. How will you ensure that this won't alienate non-committee members who want to help but can't, as it's a committee's project? You have 60 seconds to respond, starting now.
Well, the simplest answer to that is basically to say anyone who wants to be in this committee can be in the committee, but I realize that that would be a little bit of a mess. So I would say that that maybe whenever the committee gets should agree to take on a project or something like that, they should go to. I'd have them go to the General Assembly channel and say, at General Assembly, we've got this project that so and so's asked us to do. Here's the details. Here's when we're going to try and be online to get it done. If you want to come and pitch in, by all means, feel free to do so.
Okay, thank you, JP. Those were the only real serious questions that we got, and I don't want to really waste time with the more childish questions some people sent in. We might do that at the end if we have time, but for now, we're going to go to another rebuttal section where each candidate will have a 90-second rebuttal period. So we're going to start with Castle this time. Castle, you will have 90 seconds to rebut any of the points that JP made in his answering of the audience members' questions, and then JP will have 90 seconds to respond, and you will also have another 90 seconds to issue your rebuttals against Castle, for which Castle will have another 90 seconds to respond. So Castle, you have 90 seconds to rebut any of JP's points, starting now.
I have no rebuttals. We can just move on to JP's chance.
All right, JP, 90 seconds to rebut, starting now.
I have nothing to say. Let's just move on.
All right, that's a pretty short rebuttal. So that's pretty much it for the debate. The candidates have been asking to hear the more nonsensical questions, so First question. This is obviously not a serious question, but we're going to start with JP, and that is, what is your opinion on recreational marijuana?
I would say anything. Honestly, as long as there's regulations in place to, like, as long as there's like a legal age limit and a like licensed manufacturers, good places to, like, official places to get it and stuff like that, I'd be all for it. From what I've heard, there aren't really any major long-term health risks because of it. I don't really think there's any reason anymore for it to be illegal.
All right. I'd like to remind our viewers that we're in the nonsensical questions section of the debate. The rest of the debate is pretty much over, so if you don't want to hear any of this, you can just stop watching right now. But we're going to ask the same question to you, Castle. What is your opinion on recreational marijuana?
It never should have been illegal. Legalize pot, ban alcohol. That's it.
All right, then. And then we've got two questions. I'm sensing from the same person, I'm sensing a bit of a theme with these questions, but we're going to start with you, Castle. What are your opinions on Castle's airports?
All of them are good except Horizon. That's a terrible airport. No one should go to it.
All right, JP, want to answer? What are your opinions on Castle's airports?
Undisputed best airports on the server, don't at me.
All right, and then the next question from the same person, again sensing a theme. Can you address the issue of how IKEAs are so land-scarring? He didn't specify which person to ask it to, so I'm going to assume both. So JP, can you address the issue of why IKEAs are so land-scarred?
Well, first of all, Robot Kitty, I would say, seeing as it's a giant big box store with an equally giant parking lot, that's kind of going to happen. Aside from that, I think, well, it should be up to the person who gets it to landscape around it. But aside from that, the Swedish meatballs are delicious, and I have no problems with IKEA or their landscaping. Yes.
All right, and Castle, same question to you. Could you address the issue of how IKEAs are so land-scarring?
Well, I like to do things to mitigate that. When I install IKEAs, I always terraform around them, with the exception of Hempstead, because the owner insisted that they would do the terraforming themselves. That has not happened yet. But every other IKEA that's been installed has been fully terraformed around, and so that is how I address that issue when I install IKEAs. However, in the future, I would be willing to look into multi-story IKEAs that need less floor space.
All right. The next question is asked towards you, Castle. Someone asks, why do you want to ban alcohol?
Why do I want to ban alcohol? Well, I haven't seen pot kill anyone, but I have seen alcohol kill people.
Can I respond to this question too?
Sure.
Well, I kind of agree that, well, because what I said about the other substance we mentioned was like, no, it has, I haven't seen any long-term bad side effects. Well, well, God saying in staff chat, boo, alcohol is amazing. Well, how amazing is it when you get so drunk at a party you can't even remember what happened, then pass out in a pool of your own vomit, wake up having no idea who you are or where you are. Well, maybe not who you are, or having no idea where you are, how you got there, or who's this laying down next to me. I mean, there's so much. I've heard so many horror stories about it. So, I mean, I feel like it would be impossible to do, but I think that society as a whole would be better off without it.
All right. So that's it with our questions that have nothing to do with your qualifications for running for president and are largely irrelevant, but that's all right because the debate is over. This has been the MBS News debate for the United Cities October 2017 election, specifically the presidential debate. Thank you to JPH Golf 4321 and _Castle, both independent candidates, for coming to this debate. MBS News is going to cover the election results when they come in on the 22nd of October. That is a Sunday. We're going to be covering them on our wiki page. You'll see the results as they come in. And thank you for watching the debate. I'm Kitty Cat 1231 at the MBS Broadcasting House in Central City. Have a great day.